Record indicate that all commissioners are present this evening, and we are ready to get the ball rolling. First order of business will be the approval of minutes from our last meeting. Any comments, questions, statements about those minutes, commissioners?
None here.
Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Move the minutes be accepted as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good. Let's move on to the TIF annual presentation. Thank you for preparing this for us, by the way.
Of course. Good evening. My name is Emma Adlam. I'm with Baker Tilly, formerly Umlauf. What is the secret to turning this guy on? Oh. Okay, so you all should have copies in front of you, but just so other people in the audience can see too. So tonight I'm going over your annual TIF report. This will look a little bit different from your TIF annual presentations you've seen in the past. There was recent legislation that was passed that requires Redevelopment Commission to hold an annual meeting to discuss your budget, a long-term plan, and then your impacts on overlapping taxing units. So I'll start with some basics of TIF and economic development terms, then go into your TIF area specifically, and then wrap up on the impacts on the overlapping taxing units. So just to start, we're with Baker Tilly, we're your financial advisors, so we want to give you our contact information just since it has changed recently. So if you have any questions throughout the year, you can feel free to email Brian, me, or Lauren Tiemann. So since members of the public or from the overlapping taxing units might be in the audience or watching, we just wanted to start with some basic terms and definitions of TIF and how tax increment works. So at a time when the TIF area is created, at that time the assessed value of the area becomes the base assessed value of that TIF area, and that stays as going towards overlapping taxing units and does not get captured by TIF. So this blue bar at the bottom is the base assessed value that continues to go to overlapping taxing units. As development occurs in a TIF area, the increase in assessed value gets captured by the TIF, and this is the green triangle, and we refer to that as incremental assessed value. After the TIF area has reached its life and expires, that incremental assessed value gets released to all of the overlapping taxing units, and so that, and with the base assessed value, is part of the overlapping taxing units, and you see the orange at the end of the life of the TIF area.
So before you continue,
Yeah.
what you're telling me by this graphic is that the base assessed value doesn't change, therefore the tax impact of that property is not impacted by our TIF activities.
And every year you have to do something called neutralizations, which does account for trending, just natural increases in assessed value that does not occur from commercial development. So we do adjust your base value annually so that the TIF doesn't capture more than it has to, and that is a state requirement that we're just finishing yours, I think, today or tomorrow. So it's happening right now. But the base value does go to the overlapping taxing units the whole time.
So that activity would be similar to the statements that all of us property owners receive that says your assessed value is increased by a little bit each year. So that even happens for the base, assessed value.
The base gets adjusted for that too.
Okay, thank you.
So throughout this presentation, you're going to hear a couple of terms. You're going to hear economic development area, allocation area, and special benefits tax. And I just wanted to define these terms just so everyone has a basis of understanding going forward. So when a TIF area is created, it has to have two components, an allocation area and an economic development area. The allocation area, the boundaries or the parcels in which the tax increment is collected. The economic development area can have a bigger boundary, and that is the boundary for which the Redevelopment Commission can spend those dollars. So for this example, the red box is the economic development area. the orange shaded is the allocation area. An economic development area can have multiple allocation areas, which Lebanon's does. You, in 2017, consolidated all of your different economic development areas, so you have allocation areas within them. And then there's a term called the special benefits tax. And all of the industrial park bonds that you have issued have a property tax or special benefits tax backup. The boundaries that this tax is based on is coterminous with the city of Lebanon. So if you have TIF bonds with a backup, it is a property tax backup on all of the city. So that's, you'll hear me refer to a special benefits tax or an SBT, and that's what that backup is referring to. And then throughout the presentation, when we go to each of your individual TIF areas, you'll notice that they will have different expiration dates. And if a TIF area has an expansion, that expansion will also have a different expiration date. And the term of the life of each of those expansion areas depends on the legislation that was in place at the time that area was created. So we just wanted to put kind of a cheat sheet to help you go back to figure out when an area might expire, or if you're ever wondering kind of why we have different dates that might quite not make sense. It just depends on the legislation that was in place at the time that that particular area was created. So to move into Lebanon-specific TIF areas, your biggest TIF area is the industrial park. It was created in 1994, and you can see that it was expanded several times, most recently in 2017. And as I mentioned on the last slide, each of these expansion areas have different expiration dates. They are detailed in greater detail in the TIF report that I've put in front of each of you, with this kind of high level of when they all expire. In 2019, the industrial park's estimated tax increment is estimated to be just under $2,400,000, or just over $2,450,000. The industrial park has 7 bonds outstanding that are payable from the industrial park TIF. They all have that special benefits tax backup, but the Redevelopment Commission uses TIF to pay for all of these bonds. The 2017 and the 2018 bonds have a formal pledge of TIF, but you do use TIF for paying all of these 7 bond issues. This is a summary of the cash flow for the industrial park. If you want to spend greater time looking into it, pages 19 through 21 of the TIF report break it out into minute detail. But for your estimated revenues, you see the estimated TIF at the top. It is estimated to grow a little bit each year due to the roll-off of existing property tax abatements. Then you receive lease payments in the amount of $240,000 per year, and then just some miscellaneous receipts like interest. So your total revenues are anticipated to go a little above $3 million by 2022. For your disbursements, we've consolidated them into 3 categories. Your debt service payments, annual pay-as-you-go projects, so they're expenses that you do each year, like a facade grant or the Heart of Lebanon grant. And then we have one-time pay-as-you-go expenses for particular projects that are identified for 2019. So you can see in that blue line at the bottom, this is what your estimated ending balance would be at the end of 2019 through 2022.
So despite all of our activity, our balance is still growing.
You do. You have a very healthy balance.
Oh, fantastic.
Plan well. So moving forward, all but one of the bonds that we'll be talking about are purchased by the developer or by the company for the bonds moving forward. So they're only payable from your pledged TIF revenues, and the City and Redevelopment Commission are not responsible for shortfalls. So the next several TIF areas will show you will have a shortfall from the debt service payments, but I just wanted to emphasize that the Redevelopment Commission is not on the hook for any shortfalls that are being shown. So the DA lubricant area was created in 2010, will expire in 2035, and the Redevelopment Commission pledged 80% of the TIF from the DA lubricant area toward the repayment of the bonds. And so the commission, you guys keep 20% for your own use. That does not go towards the repayment of the bonds. So in looking from a cash flow perspective, we broke it out into the pledged portion and the commission portion. So the top box compares the pledged 80% TIF to the annual debt service payments. And like I mentioned a slide ago, there is a shortfall being shown of about $20,000 per year while those bonds are outstanding. But that was the risk that the company took in purchasing the bonds, and so the commission is not required to make up that difference. So the bonds are estimated to mature in 2022. So when you look at the commission TIF, you'll notice that the estimated tax increment for the commission in 22 and 23 will increase as the DA lubricant bonds mature. And so you have paid, in 2018, you did pay some miscellaneous expenses out of this fund. So we continued showing about $20,000 per year from the commission. Your next area is the Building 11 allocation area that you probably refer to as the Scott Barrett area. This was created in 2011 and expanded a little bit in 2014, but the majority of this TIF area is the original area and would expire in 2040. Similar to DA Lubricant, the Redevelopment Commission pledged 75% of the TIF, and you guys keep 25% for your own use. So the pledged TIF will bring about $94,000 in 2019, and the commission TIF will be about $31,000 in 2019. So for a similar comparison of the top shows the pledged TIF to debt service payments, and once again, that is showing a shortfall for all years, but you are only responsible for the 75% of TIF that you collect. And then the bottom chart shows the Redevelopment Commission TIF. So you're estimating to get about $20,000 per year, and it does increase a little bit as property tax abatements roll off from the area. The next area is FiberNet. This was created in 2011 and will expire in 2036. The commission pledged 100% of the FiberNet TIF to the repayment of the 2011 FiberNet bonds. It's about $41,000 per year, and there is once again a shortfall, so you only make that $41,000 payment on the FiberNet bonds, and they just don't get the rest of that shortfall payment. Your next area is the State Road 32 area, which you probably refer to as the GDI area. It was created in 2014, expires in 2040. You pledge 75% of your TIF. So in 2019, the total estimated TIF is right under $198,000, and the commission would keep about $49,000 of TIF. Unlike the other areas, there's not a shortfall from the TIF portion. So from the pledged TIF, in 2019, there'd be about $67,500 remaining after the debt service payments from just the pledged TIF portion, and then it will increase to about $115,000 remaining after the debt service payments, and then the commission also retains the 25% of the TIF as well. Next up is your downtown area, which is not estimated to collect anything this year. Hopefully, as property tax abatements roll off, you will are estimated to collect about $8,000 in 2020. But it's just because of, there's a lot of negative increment being generated in this area. You collect, I think you've collected $2 in the area. So you're, hopefully in 2020, you'll collect about $8,000. The next area is the Ken Foods area. It was created in 2017. Currently, it does not have an expiration date because there are no bonds pledged to this TIF area. And in 2019 will be the first year you receive tax increment, and you're expected to receive about $36,500 from this area. Next up is the Gateway Marketplace area. It was created in 2018 for the Gateway Marketplace project, and the Redevelopment Commission pledged the Gateway TIF as well, and then the city pledged food and beverage revenues, and then there is a special benefits tax backup on the 2018 bonds. So because of the timing of when the bonds were issued to when the project is built and TIF starts coming in, there's estimated to be a shortfall in TIF for the first 3 years, and this was known and planned as the bonds, we were doing the feasibility for the bonds. So the city would use food and beverage revenues for the first 3 years until the TIF is, the project is done and fully assessed and they start paying. Then your last area is the Patterson Street allocation area, which was created in 2018. Currently, it does not have an expiration date because bonds have not been issued. And when we last looked at, when we last did a TIF estimate for the project, we estimated about $63,000 in TIF. But this could change when the project moves forward, depending on the scope of it. So to turn from talking about the Lebanon TIF areas, we want to talk about TIF and how it interacts with the overlapping taxing units. So one of the questions that we hear often is, does TIF take away money from overlapping taxing units? Really, for Lebanon, you are a good example of meeting what's called the but-for test. So the question is would the development have occurred without the use of tax increment? But Lebanon has the DA lubricant area, the State Road 32 area, and your areas, the question would be, would the building have been built and development have happened had you not used TIF? So Lebanon is a good example of using TIF to support development in your area. There's also two other important points for TIF and interacting with some overlapping taxing units. First is, Lebanon Redevelopment Commission, you don't capture a lot of personal property. And the development that is in the TIF area, all the personal property that is generated in that TIF area goes to all the overlapping taxing units. So they're seeing a benefit right away, even while the TIF is still in place. And also another benefit is that as jobs are coming in from your new buildings and the new development, this has the potential to add to local income tax revenue throughout the community. And one other thing we wanted to focus on, which Dr. Taylor is the expert here, but is the impact of school funding and TIF and kind of in the relationship between TIF and schools. It's not a big discussion in Lebanon, but it is kind of across the state. So we wanted to bring up just a couple of generic points and then one specific to Lebanon. So one thing to note is that a lot of school funding does come from the state, that it's not just locally funded. Second is that the operation funds and debt service funds from the school are levy limited. So if the school is at their maximum levy, that passing through assessed value doesn't necessarily generate more dollars for the school. It can reduce the tax rate, but if they're at their maximum levy, they don't necessarily get more dollars. TIF can have an indirect impact on schools through circuit breaker. So if you were to pass through assessed value, that reduction of tax rate could reduce circuit breaker losses throughout the community. But as you're probably aware of, Lebanon and the community doesn't have significant circuit breaker losses compared to a lot of other areas throughout the state. And finally, Lebanon schools are currently benefiting from your TIF because they have a referendum rate in place. So referendums that were passed after 2009 actually capture the TIF assessed value. So this reduces the tax rate that they have to levy for their referendum debt service funds. So they are benefiting from the TIF currently. And finally, for the last slide, just a couple small other points we wanted to highlight, that about $22 million worth of infrastructure has been funded from TIF bonds throughout the years. So the question would be, is if you didn't use TIF, what would you have used? And the answer would likely have been property taxes. So by using TIF, you don't have to put a property tax levy in place for all of these bonds, and that benefits not only Lebanon, but the overlapping taxing units due to circuit breaker as well. And then we just wanted to mention that the industrial park TIF area does not include all of the industrial park. There are some buildings that are not in the industrial park area. And finally, that you don't capture all the personal property that is within the boundaries of Lebanon's industrial park TIF. And with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. That was excellent. Commissioners, any questions?
Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, and you did such a great job. You better be careful. You'll have to do that every year for us.
I think I have to.
So, anyways, no, really, thank you very much. This information is very helpful for us. Appreciate it. Okay. All right, so let's move on to old business. The one item we have in the old business portion of the agenda is the facade request for 105 East Main. And we had a balance that was left over from that, but we also found out that we need to update our resolution. So before the commission this evening, we have a resolution which is 2019-05. Is the new number, and 05 is the facade grant, correct, Mr. Sharon?
Yes, that's correct. We initially had a misnumber on my end that went out Friday, and then followed up with Tanya's in her office, and so it's 2019-05 is
Okay.
the correct one.
And on that resolution is, and I haven't seen the -05, is the blank completed for the dollar amount that's required to make up the difference?
Yes, and Derek, just correct me if I'm wrong, I think that is $15,026.54.
Good memory.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So in that, just to recap, in that resolution, we don't need to have a public reading of that, correct?
I could read it and at least address.
Yeah, if you
you'd
could, just
like.
give us a
Yep.
summary so that the people at home know what we're talking about. That'd be great. Thank you.
Commissioners, this is Resolution 2019-05 is amending the Resolution 2018-04 and authorizing additional funding for the Downtown Lebanon Grant Program. And essentially, if you remember, in 2018, this commission had approved a budget of $250,000 for a 5-year period, of $250,000 each year for the facade program. And going back and reviewing after the last meeting, looking at the 2018 resolution, it really only addressed 1 year, and we thought it'd be more appropriate, even though the approval and the discussion was for the 5-year period, to just essentially amend that and state it's for that 5-year period. And then we're a little mindful, or certainly mindful of the discussions at the last meeting and in talking with Derek Warren. At least, obviously, it's up to this commission, but if, Derek can at least elaborate a little bit what the difference is, but we had some discussion is what could the commission do to fund the difference of the facade program from the last request. And as you heard from Ms. Adlam earlier. There's a significant amount of money in the commission's budget that could support that if additional shortfall, if this commission so desires. So with that, that's essentially what this resolution stands for.
Very good. Commissioners, any questions about the resolution?
So the resolution is going to approve it for 5 years, right? The $250,000 for 5 years?
Correct, yeah. It just essentially amends what was done before that was an annual budgeted item and just sets it forth for all 5 years. And then the next item would be if the commission would so choose to fund the shortfall that, again, Mr. Warren spoke about at the last meeting and can address tonight.
And the shortfall is that we're out of money for this year?
For this year.
For this year?
Yeah, we've allocated all $250,000 for the 2019 year budget for the facade program.
I'm just kind of concerned about doing that, raise, the additional 15,000. I just feels like to me we're opening up a can of worms for us to that we just kind of don't control our budget a little bit. We authorized 250. I think 250 ought to be the limit per year. And if we get to those projects that we can't fund it, we can't fund it. And they'll just have to come to next year as opposed to us going back and trying to fund additional money. I think once we start down that road, that's going to be a process from now on that it'll keep coming to us that way. Every year we'll run out and then we'll come back and somebody will want to ask additional money and we'll turn around and do it again. I just think we ought to stay on the same pace, that it's 250 every year. And, we get to that point, it runs out. We just have to wait till next year.
So on that point, and this is not an argument, it's just merely a statement, is that on that point, I'd like to express that this is a one-time occurrence because the program was so young. I don't think that we were as cognizant as we should have been. So this will be a one-time event, and I know that in the future that I won't vote to surpass the budgeted amount. This is a situation that's special as well because it is a roof project. So that's just the two considerations that I had for pursuing it further. So we certainly we all have a vote, so I respect your position.
My experience tells me that every project is special.
Of course,
Okay.
of course,
So,
I don't argue
I've
that.
been at this a long time, so I've seen every project a special project.
Okay.
And so, that's my point of view on it.
Oh, very good. No, I respect that. That's why we're all here. So,
Mr. President.
thank you.
If I may. Dick, I concur under the general practices that I think are best for this commission is that we do abide by our established budget. Where I differ on this one, and I concur, everybody's grandbaby is the best grandbaby, right? So every project is the special project. I do that. But I think in this particular case, I'll go back to that we didn't know what we didn't know. And so in this exception, and I would consider this an exception, I did not anticipate the first time we ran through the facade grant, we didn't have nearly the interest, or did we have the application. This is the first time to encounter this. I think because it's the first time, I hate to apply a punitive response because we didn't anticipate what this might have impact. So I guess I'm taking the easy way out, the political way out, and saying I agree, but I disagree. I agree with that this commission needs to follow their established budget, needs to follow their resolutions, but at the same time, I think we're still in a learning process. The presentation that just was given to us, to me, simply says this community is continuing to grow in leaps and bounds, and we're entering areas that for the past 2 decades, we've never had the luxury of entering with dollar amounts and revenue generation that we've never seen before. And so to that effect, I would agree with Jason in that I am in favor of this one-time exemption, but any future request of this nature, now that we know what we're doing, I would not be at all in favor of extending, well, yeah, but. And I know we're setting a precedent, and trust me, for 20 some odd years, I avoided precedent settings because if you do it once, I can
Do it
guarantee
again.
you, fellow commissioners, it's going to come back one more time. But in this particular incident, I think it's more a lack of our full understanding of, one, the success of the facade program, and two, the situation that occurred where we had almost a perfect split, if I'm not mistaken, and I would ask Derek, it's almost half of the amount that we had set aside for the original request. Is that correct? Are we close to?
Yeah. Within $2,000, yeah.
So again, I'm a firm believer that you set a budget and you follow it, even when the difficult answer is no. But I also am a firm believer that organizations such as this commission learn as we go forward. And I think this is a learning experience that we should take into consideration. But I do feel, as one vote on this commission, that at least this time I would be willing to grant the exception based on the fact that it's something new to us.
Maybe the suggestion might be not to pass this ordinance and have it not a 5-year, but have it at just a year by year. And based on what we did last year, we could estimate what we think it may be next year, and raise that amount or lower that amount wherever we think it may be for cases that may come up. If this is the first year when we've overspent our amount and this was August, we might look at, like, oh, maybe next year ought to be 300,000 instead of 250. So we don't come back to this type thing, so.
The only caution I have there is I don't want to get into a habit of chasing dollar amounts. We are a popular program. I think what's promoted this facade program is just the first impression. You see what happens when people spend the money and upgrade, and either it's the visual is much better, but also probably revenue generation is better. It benefits across the board. I think it just doesn't benefit the individual owner that's requesting, but there's collateral benefit across the TIF area as well. So I'm in favor of looking at that increase as we look at our total budget. As we see, we've got projected revenue increases coming up, but I would also be, this is the curmudgeon in me, I probably would say I'm really hesitant to start chasing dollar amounts, because that also can spin out of control very quickly as well.
So in my opinion, I'd have to agree with that, because at least we have a foundation. If we need to pass a resolution each year to increase it over the next 5 years, but I would rather do that than have to chase the full amount. So that's just my position. And at this point, I think we have the resolution written, and I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we pass Resolution 2019-05 as written.
I'd like to interrupt and ask Derek if he could recap on the project that's requesting this overrun.
Yeah, sure.
It's roof specific. Is it 25% of the project or less as outlined in the program details?
Well, this isn't necessarily structural in nature,
Okay.
so it would qualify for the full amount.
Okay.
You know, a roof isn't load bearing necessarily. The membrane, you start talking about the ceiling, rafters, joists, you start to get into that
This
conversation.
is the cover,
This
not
is
the
cover.
structure.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. And I will say, if you don't mind me injecting a few
Sure.
comments, Caleb and Sierra and I have been talking about some tweaks to the resolution as well. And I think when you start talking about one particular point that has been under discussion, the last application of the year, I mean, I have a better chance of winning the Powerball than landing the last application on 0 for the year. So either we're always going to be giving money back, or you write some language into the resolution that allows for consideration of the final application to be fully funded if it warrants that. Instead of increasing the cost, you could always keep it at that $250, and if you need to add another $15,000 to it at the end of the year, we could write some language into that resolution to allow the RDC to consider that. And continue on with the consistent amount for the year instead of chasing dollars. So, but it would only apply for the last application of the year. And once that consideration is either approved or denied, no other applications can come back in for the year. So it would protect you from that Pandora's box of people continuing to come back in and say, well, you gave money to the last person, and when you didn't have it, why can't I get it? Well, because the resolution says only the last application of the year is under consideration for that.
Maybe 25,000 is the cap. It's 10%.
We don't have wording,
Possibly, yeah.
we don't have wording in our resolution that states that sort of thing.
Not in the current, I didn't see it.
Not currently, but we're working on that for an amendment to the resolution.
Derek, in essence, if I may, are you the clearinghouse for applications coming to this level?
Yes,
So I guess it's fair to say you're not bringing any more to us, correct?
that is correct.
Okay, we appreciate that, and I think that also has to be clarified. This is a partnership. It's just not the commission as a standalone, but those individuals that have supported us, and Derek's done a great job. I think that understanding has to be out there among all either applicants and/or reviewers and/or recommenders and approvers that, you know, we've reached this level, and there may be 5 more great requests come, but in this year, I would not be pleased if I saw another facade application come before this commission to put us on the spot to say yes or no.
You know, I'm your gatekeeper, and
Thank you.
After the last application of the year, you will not hear any more until the next.
And just one other, because I don't want to kill the program, but one other question, then do you file those away and say, hey, no more money this year, but you are number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 in the queue for next year, or do they have to reapply in the following year?
It's a first come, first served basis, so if I were to receive an application for someone who already has a certificate of appropriateness from the HPC, if I receive that within the next month, come January of 2020, they would be first.
So they're in the queue in 2020, okay. And I think that's fine. I don't want to kill interest in the program because someone's going to say, well, I can't, you know, I'm going to have to compete again for placement in 2020.
Yep, I would start stacking them up, so.
Thank you.
There's the potential for that here in the next few months.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President, or Mr. Commissioner.
No problem, no problem. Thank you very much. So I have a motion already out there to approve Resolution 2019-05 as written. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Having a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2.
Do you need to know who voted?
Okay.
Can I suggest one more thing?
Yes, sir. Please.
Can we work on some language that, some appropriate language, what Derek was talking about?
Wait,
To
well-
amend bring an amendment later on? to
Yes, sir,
amend
absolutely.
this resolution?
Absolutely.
Because I support his idea of, if we had an amendment in there, I would support that idea.
Okay, I agree with that. I just didn't want to hang up the
Sure, that's
extra
fine.
money for this time.
It's
so.
fine. Dick, just so I'm clarified, the amendment is that if the last application of the year goes over, we're going to say, here's a set amount of dollars we will go over in the exception?
No,
Or
I
the
think
amendment-
I think we just consider, if there's no funding, not enough funding available when the next application comes in, that would allow us to still go ahead and consider that application for that year, but that would be completely the end.
Just like we did here, but maybe we set a not to exceed amount for the.
Well, I don't know if it has to be an amount, because you don't know what that last application is going to be. It could
1,000
come in
short.
$10,005 or $100,000. If it's a good project and we're interested in it, we ought to at least have that opportunity to do that. But I think it needs to be, we need to put that amendment together and then tie it to the resolution. I think we'd support that. Then we wouldn't have to worry about.
So we'd have a vehicle to award a
We'd
little
have
bit
a
extra.
vehicle
Very
to.
good. I understand.
To move forward,
Okay.
okay?
We just need the ground rules to do that. right?
Exactly.
Excellent, excellent. I
Have
agree.
Rob work
I agree.
on an amendment and
Okay,
put it, thank you.
very good.
Yeah, and in fact, I don't know if we want to talk about that tonight under other business or not, but like I said, we've been working as a subcommittee here to amend some of the language. I don't know that we've necessarily landed on anything concrete, but I'll let Caleb and Sierra decide if we want to discuss that here tonight.
I think you've covered it pretty well. We're talking about possibly changing, as far as the structural and the roof-related items, to changing the percentages of the match or the level, and just discussing how effective that is in helping the facade program as a whole. We're trying to attract,
Are you
try to
looking at the whole facade program, or are you just?
We're looking at the whole facade program, how it's
So
worded,
I
and
could-
how.
I could send you some ideas. then,
That'd
right?
be great.
Okay,
Be open
yeah,
to
be
that.
good.
But just looking at the level of the match based on the project they want to do, and not just have a blanket match, regardless of the type of project they're doing.
I'll send you my thoughts.
We'd love to hear them.
Is that clarifying? Is that?
Yes, and
Okay,
I just wanted to bring another point to the table to kind of get everyone else's opinion on this. This is just my opinion, but I think we all want to run it kind of as a business and watch our money very closely. And I didn't know how everyone thought about the idea of creating some kind of verbiage saying that businesses are restricted to like sell a property that we give money to. Because I understand we want to fix up all the buildings. We want, things to be the best. But I don't think the RDC is here to help people profit. Does that make sense? And I really think that we want to give back to Lebanon and the owners who want to stay and, want to be there. I didn't know if anybody else had any opinions on that subject.
It's part of that. I think that's a good idea. So part of that discussion is, do we set a length of time between the approval of the facade grant and the sale of the property? Or are we looking at the sale of the property would then generate a percentage of return back to the art? And I don't know if that's legal either. I like the idea.
That's kind of,
I don't want to pay for
something.
somebody to make money off of our.
Yes, because it's for the city, it's not for a person to profit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Not saying
No.
that, I don't know if anybody's doing that, I have no idea, that's not geared towards anyone in general. That was just a blanket statement. When I was reading it, I thought, hey, maybe we should have some verbiage so that money stays with the city. Does that make sense? I don't know. You guys may not feel that way,
So-
but I just,
So here's what I suggest. I think those are all fantastic ideas. As a group, we will, which one of you would be the touch point? Because I think as a group, we go ahead and send it and make one master list, and we could come up with a way, so then we all know who the conduit is.
Sierra, you want to take on that?
sure, that's good.
Okay, so that being said, I love the idea, and I love the idea of making the program better. So as a commission, if we come up with ideas, or if we hear of ideas, so people, out there in TV land, if you'd like to make some suggestions, feel free to share them with the city here. But we'll channel all those through you,
Okay.
and then as that subcommittee develops the verbiage, we'll have a review of that as a commission in public, so that we could all come to an agreement. Does that sound fair to everyone?
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep, that's what I'd love to do. So, okay, we will keep that on our radar. So, let's continue on to the new business. The new business includes a couple more resolutions. Thank you, Mr. Warren. First up is the Resolution 2019-03, which introduces the agreement between the RDC and the CDC. And Mr. Bontrager will clarify the situation for us.
Very good. Thank you, RDC members. I'm here to talk about the next special project for downtown Lebanon. This came up with the RDC probably about a year ago when we looked at some bids at that time for the former Estes property, which the RDC owns. And we've been honing that project ever since, and now are to the point where we have a project agreement with the developer that is in its about 80 to 90% complete. There's still some I's to dot and T's to cross, but we're very close on the agreement with the developer, and they've finalized the conceptual development for the first phase of that project, and we're ready to start getting some approvals in place so we can move that project forward later this year. So just a little bit of background here for those that may have not been on the RDC when we looked at this last time. So this is an outline of the Estes property, which is owned by the Redevelopment Commission. It was purchased probably about a year and a half ago. December 2017, I think, is when we closed on this property. As you can see, there's the former Estes dealership on the east side of Lebanon Street, and on the west side, what you see in that aerial photography is actually our staging area for the downtown project, but it was where Estes stored a lot of their inventory on the west side of the road. What you'll also see, you probably can't see it very well, is just north of where our property ends. You can see that there's a couple of buildings owned by Forza Development, and that's the developer for this project. What they're looking to develop in the first phase of their project is the west side of the road, so it would include the property we own on the west side plus the buildings that they own just north of that. They're looking to develop a 4-story mixed-use building. It's about 50,000 square feet in total. You'll have the first floor that'll have about 13,000 square feet of leasable commercial restaurant space, and then 3 floors of multifamily for a total about 39 units of multifamily, 13 on each floor. That represents a construction project cost of about $8.5 million. So it's a great project for our downtown. What they would do as part of that, they would include some parking behind the building here to the west, and then they would also be demolishing the building on the east side of the road and putting some additional parking on the east side of the road to provide all their parking needs for that building. Still working on finalizing the exact use of that building, and they'll figure out how many parking spaces they actually do need for that. We do know they will need some of that east side of the road for parking. Their intention is, if all goes well in the next few years and this building starts to lease up, that they'll see a need for a phase 2 project, which would be on the east side of the road. The interesting thing there is that would cover up some of their parking, so that would have to be accompanied by a broader parking solution in our downtown. So that's a bigger lift when we start getting to phase 2 projects. But the phase 1 project can all be accommodated on this site. They're looking to start design yet this fall and hopefully be under construction early next spring. That's about a 12 to 18 month construction process, but we're getting really close to getting everything done. So in terms of the support we're looking for this project, there's two ways you can accommodate. So the big challenge, and we talked about this when we looked at the Big Fork Crossing project a few months ago. Our big challenge is our existing lease rates in downtown Lebanon don't support new construction. So new construction needs typically $20 to $30 a square foot in rent for commercial space. We've got folks right now renting space for less than $10 a square foot in downtown Lebanon. So it's real hard to be competitive with new construction when you've got existing space that's so much more affordable. So what the city needs to do as we step in is to try to find ways to quote unquote buy down that lease rate so they can be more competitive with some of those existing rates that you see in our downtown. The two easy ways to do that, in the Big Four case, we're actually looking to do an annual payment to them, basically a master lease payment that buys those down on an annual basis for a period of time. In this case, we're looking at it a little bit differently here. They found that financially it's more beneficial to them to receive upfront money to basically buy down the cost to build the building. So what we'll be doing in this case is we would actually be providing a grant through the Lebanon Development Corporation, the CDC. The RDC would pledge TIF dollars on an annual basis to pay back a loan that the CDC will get through a traditional bank. So the Community Development Corporation will, it's the total cost of the incentive to the developer is $1.5 million. They will be paying, the developer is paying us $320,000 for the west side property. So part of that $1.5 million will be likely that $320,000 reinvested back into the site through either infrastructure or site prep, et cetera. The remaining balance, 1.2 million give or take, the CDC will be obtaining a bank loan from a local bank. We're actually getting terms right now on that bank loan for a 15-year loan. The Redevelopment Commission would pledge annual TIF increment from the project to the Lebanon Development Corporation to pay back the annual debt service on that loan. So the developer will commit through the project agreement to a minimum assessed value for that building and a minimum tax payment to ensure that the Redevelopment Commission is getting enough money from the project to pay back that bank loan. So it's kind of a balancing act where we're getting terms on that bank loan so we know exactly what that payment will be. At the same time, we're going to make sure that the developer is committing to that amount. Right now, based on our projections, they're committing right now to an assessed value of $6 million on that project, that $8.5 million construction project, which would generate a tax payment of about $125,000 a year. So depending on the actual terms, we're at about a $1.25 million loan with that amount is what it's looking like on a 15-year term. So what we're doing tonight, there's two things that we're doing. The first one, the 2019-03, is a resolution that essentially provides for the RDC to enter into an agreement with the Community Development Corporation to pay a grant to them for that loan payment on an annual basis. How that will work, look at my notes here. This resolution will essentially be an appropriation for the first year payment, which probably wouldn't happen until sometime in 2020. After that, each additional year, the Redevelopment Commission would have to appropriate that money on an annual basis. So this is only really approving that first appropriation, but it is approving the overall structure of the grant to the CDC for their loan. So that's what we've got here tonight. It's pretty straightforward. This does essentially set up the ability for the RDC to execute any other agreements that are necessary for that grant. So this is really just saying, hey, we're going to do this grant, but then there's going to have to be an agreement. If there's any other stipulations that the RDC wants to place on that grant, that is still possible to do in the subsequent agreement.
Ben, if I may, real quick.
Yeah.
So if I understand you correctly, they're asking for a $1.25 million loan, grant from us.
Right.
To cover for essentially a mortgage, 15-year loan.
Right.
15 years, 1.25 divided by 15 is an $84,000 payment, annual payment. And did I hear you say correctly that it'll be a TIF that generates about 125 grand a year?
Yeah,
So
give or
that's
take.
netting the RDC 42 grand.
Well, yeah, you have to calculate interest in there. Interest is
Correct.
quite a bit.
But I
on
mean,
it,
there's
yeah.
still, we're still looking on the positive side.
Possible.
Or at
But
least
it's
break
gonna
even.
be-
We're not
It's
losing.
going to be roughly equal.
Okay.
Would be, once you look at it, because I think the terms we're getting on a 15-year loan are about I don't remember the exact number, it's about 4.6 was the first one.
Okay.
And that was equating out to roughly 110 to 125,000, depending on the amount of the loans.
Okay, so it's almost a break even.
It's about
Okay.
break even, again, depending on the final terms that we get.
So we're not going to negatively affect our growing cash
Correct.
flow.
So what we're looking at is to make sure that in any case, on any year on this debt payment on the loan, the amount that you're receiving is not going to be less than what you have to pay to the
Okay.
development corporation for the loan.
So this is a self-sustaining investment.
Correct.
Very,
Thank you.
Ben, did you engage
Sorry.
Baker Tilly in running the numbers on this to see where we're at? Not that I don't trust your math.
They're working on that right now, just to verify, but really in this case, because the developer is committing to a certain minimum payment, we're gonna get those numbers just to verify that we're in the ballpark, but the developer's gonna commit in the project agreement that their payment's gonna be no less than X. So if we know that our bank loan is $120,000 a year annual payment, we're gonna make sure that their minimum taxpayer agreement, their payment is at least $120,000.
And that's in the resolution.
It's not in this resolution, but it's in the separate project agreement that still needs to be executed at a later date.
so essentially, this resolution is an intention to do those things. This doesn't tie any numbers to it.
Correct.
This just says we're in agreement to move forward with this
We're-
type of relationship.
Yeah, we're good with the grant. We got to work out the terms still and get those in an agreement.
And then that'll be an amendment to this in order to grant the grant, no, to actually grant the funds.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be an amendment to this. It would be a separate
So I
agreement. that's put
misread.
together.
We're not approving dollars, we're simply approving the capacity to enter
The
into
structure. Yeah.
the structure. Okay, I'm sorry, I misread that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there's no dollar amounts. We don't know the final dollar amount yet. So this is really approving the structure of that grant.
Ben and Commission, if I just may clarify, just so we're clear, there is no formal pledge of TIF. It is, as Ben addressed in later, it is just an annual grant. And we've had calls with Baker Tilly addressing that. So it's a little bit different than the bond structure. I don't want there to be any confusion in that. And it sets that out in the resolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
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 Thank you, everyone, for the clarification.
Ben, one question. Go to the map,
Yep.
and I'm assuming this little, on the west side, little spot there in the middle, I'm assuming that's an alleyway or something?
It is.
So that alleyway's going to have to be dedicated off to them or something?
Not necessarily. So the sanitary sewer runs down that alley too, probably to
Okay.
about where you see it in that notch in the property. So their building will sit on a footprint that really takes up the eastern half of this, and then the western half will be parking. So they may not need that.
So that may be left, okay.
Yeah, that likely will remain. It'll probably, the alley will be good because it'll be the service vehicles, et cetera,
Okay.
get to the back of the building
Okay.
that way.
So since we're looking at the map, and since I have little ones, I'll ask the question. If I park across the street, how am I going to get, that road's already pretty busy? Is there a plan? Obviously, it's very early in the program.
Yes.
but-
Part of the commitment would be between the city and the developer. We're going to work out with the state, obviously, because it's a state
State road, right.
Some sort of pedestrian crossing, probably some sort of signal, activated signal crossing.
Well, as long as it's more substantial than a cone in the middle of the road, then
Right.
then I'll be happy.
It'll be something that there's markings in the road and likely a pedestrian activated signal.
Okay.
So the east side is all going to be parking, is that the plan?
For phase one. And they may not need the entire site for parking. We're going to calculate their parking needs as they further develop their design and figure out how many spaces they need. They're going to put as many as they can on the west side of the road, and any of the overflow will go on the east side.
But they will demolish the entire facility.
That's the intention.
Phase 2? What's phase 2?
Is an undefined development. It likely will be a similar type of building on the east side of the road, but again, like I said,
Has not been developed
it has not
yet.
been developed. It's
Okay.
depending on market demand and obviously a larger parking solution being included as well.
That was the original location of the shift,
It
right?
was the original, and they were able to acquire some property on the west side of the road. The other benefit to them is the west side of the road is in the federal opportunity zone. The east side of the road is not. There's some investment benefits to them looking at the west side of the road first, because they're not sure how long that opportunity zone is going to be available. So there is some financial benefits to them looking at the west side of the road for that.
Ben, did you bring your crystal ball?
I keep it in my back pocket at all times.
If it's there and it's not too fuzzy, like mine always was, I would ask, what would the anticipated status be of the current retail facility that's on that same side of the street? That would be the video, which may be the only one left in America, I'm not sure. The rental facility, and there, I believe there's a small fast food
Sandwich shop.
restaurant.
Yeah.
Yep.
And is there any speculation as to the status of that?
I know that this developers investor group has reached out to them just to see kind of what's going on, because again, you got kind of some odd shaped properties there because of the former railroad right of way. So at the present time, they're not interested in selling or figuring out how to be incorporated into an overall development. My guess is that sandwich shop is probably subsidizing the rent for the movie store, would be my guess. But at this time, they're in good shape. So, but again, you know, there could be a phase 3 that moves down that way too.
Well, the phase 2 it's kind of a catch-22. If phase 1 prospers, does well, the retail aspect goes well, then we'll go to phase 2. I understand that, makes good business sense. I also, though, will piggyback on Jason's concern. If there is, let's say there's a food establishment there, and parking's on the east side of the street, it's going to be a limited access, and I think, you know, families or even two people going out on a Friday night, I'm not going to take the chance of running across that road, but, so it would seem that if we could get the total project, and I know I'm on a soapbox now, that the feasibility of a prospering, financially viable phase 1 establishment would be much greater, therefore phase 2 or phase 3 would be much more of a reality.
Right. Well, and I'll get into it here in a second because the other resolution deals with the grant of the land. How this will actually work is the west side will be sold to the developer. The east side will be retained under city control. So we're essentially granting them access to that site to park.
Okay.
So let's say that developer decides 2 years from now, like, yeah, we're washing our hands from Lebanon, we're out. We're not tied to them. So if they walk away, we can go to another developer. Or let's say they decide we like the west side of the road, but we're just not ready to start on the east side, and another developer comes and says, hey, we'd like to develop that east side of the road. We're not tied to them. We could move on to another developer if somebody else comes in the table too.
So the closing that we were supposed to have with the developer, the 500,000, did that fall through then? Is that what you're saying
No,
for the east side?
it's just been changed a little bit. We're actually just going to close on part of the property with them.
Okay,
We're
okay,
going to retain control of the other.
okay.
Should I go into the second resolution? Because
Yes.
If you could do me one more favor and bring that
Yeah.
map back up for me? So you're telling me that the property on the east side, we're retaining the rights to with the,
Yes, and not just the rights, we'll maintain ownership. We'll maintain ownership, and we're giving them rights to parking there.
so when they razz the building, because the east side is the one with the building, correct?
Right.
So when they razz the building, I mean, to put the parking in, if
Who's
I'm
paying for that?
exactly.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Who's paying for raising the buildings?
They are.
They are, on the east side?
Does the city, I think is where you're going, do we have any obligation for reimbursement if they decide to pull out?
Reimbursement of those
Well,
costs.
we own you say we're owning the property.
Right.
So I don't want to step on.
No, you're.
So there's going to be a demolition cost. There could be some EPA issues. Then there's going to be the reutilization, whether it's dirt work, final paving, whatever. We're not going to allow them to leave a gravel site there. So our hope is Phase 2 hits and they're happy and we're happy, and that would be a beautiful gateway entry point for downtown. But if they say, no, we're not, you get another developer, they've got $1 million. I don't know. I have no idea. Somebody tell me. Whatever they have in the demolition and the paving cost, who reimburses that? Or is are they rolling the dice and saying, hey?
So it's a cost that they'll bear. I mean, I'm sure that part of our investment, $1.5 million investment of the project is probably addressing some of those
Okay.
site costs for them. But there would be no additional reimbursement to them at a later date. So our investment in the project is at $1.5 million. After that, it's on the developer.
So they're paying us $500,000 and we're going to retain the ownership of it, is what
They're
I'm
paying
hearing.
us $320 for the west side of the road.
The west,
So
okay. I thought, I didn't realize
Yeah,
both
so-
sides were part of the,
Right, yeah, so the total site assessed value is about $525,000
okay,
or something like
okay.
that. When you split it up and then when you look at the appraisal.
The west side's the
320,
320.
the east side's about 200.
Okay.
Ironically, so that
Okay.
the building itself actually doesn't have a whole lot of value. That's the land. So,
Okay.
so because the west side is a bigger piece of property, it has a higher value than the east side, even though the building's on the east side.
Okay, that makes more sense now. I thought,
Yeah.
for some reason, I thought we just sold the east side. I didn't put the two together
Yeah,
originally.
yeah, we still maintain ownership of both sides of the road. They're looking to
Okay.
buy the west side, we'll retain the east side.
Okay.
Ben,
Okay.
I hate to ask, but have we done any testing on the east side?
There has been a phase 1, and I believe a phase 2. We did it before we bought it.
Okay,
Basically, the only thing it says is you can't have any wells.
and it can't have any
Can't
what?
have any wells.
Oh, okay,
Which-
good,
That's.
You're on city water.
Essentially, there's no restrictions.
yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So any more questions or concerns about Resolution 2019-03, which is an agreement to be in an agreement?
I motion we pass resolution 2019-03 as written.
I second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Very good. On to Resolution 2019-04.
Very good. So continuation discussion, we already talked a little bit about the land grants. So what this agreement or this resolution says is that the RDC will grant the property to the Lebanon Development Corporation, and then the Lebanon Development Corporation will complete the transaction with the developer.
It's the Community Development Corporation, correct?
Well, the official title is Lebanon Development Corporation, but it is a community development corporation.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So by that, so since it is a grant of land rather than a purchase, you can put conditions on that. So if you say, we're going to grant this property to the CEC, but it has to be for X, or if X doesn't happen, the RDC wants the property back. Or the other condition we talked about is the Lebanon Development Corporation is going to be paid $320,000 for that property. You could say that money either has to be used to reinvest into the project, or you need to pass that money through to the Redevelopment Commission. So you can place conditions on the grant of land to make sure that it occurs in the way that you want it to occur, as opposed to just a direct transfer of the property. So those details have yet to be worked out. This is just saying, yeah, we're good with the grant of land. We'll work out the agreement with the CDC later. But you can place conditions on the grant of land like that to make sure that the land is used by the development corporation in the way that you want it to, as opposed to, if you grant them the land and then they sell it to Subway, which that's not what we all want. So you can place conditions on the
chatter
grant of land
continues.
to make sure it's used in the way that you want it to be used. So that's what this is. You'll be granting actually both sides of the road to the Lebanon Development Corporation. So both the west and east side, and then the transaction then would be that they would sell that property, the west side property, to Forza Commercial Real Estate, and Lebanon Development Corporation would retain ownership, or I guess control, quote unquote, of the east side of the road to allow for the parking to occur.
So do they have any sort of approval powers then of what happens by the developer on the east side of that property?
Is the Development Corporation?
Correct.
Not necessarily unless you give it to them.
Well, I'm talking about approval power for the developer. Because what it sounds like is we would be, if we just say we're granting it to the corporation, is there still some sort of checks and balances that keeps the developer in check so that they don't put up a, I don't know, a
Well-
garbage dump right there, or, you know,
Right,
something?
and they can't do anything other than parking with that without any approvals. So.
Okay,
The only, we're retaining ownership, we're allowing them parking rights. If they want to do something other than park there, it's got to be approved, and they probably you would probably want them to buy the property.
Okay.
from us.
But are you talking about the east side though? Like if we sell it over to them and then, I'm sorry, the west side? If we sell
no,
it
no,
over to
no,
them, they
not the,
can't back out?
not the west side, the east side.
Okay.
Because the reason why is because that relationship seemed a little odd to me between we keep the rights, but they own it, or we own it, and
They have the rights.
they have the rights, yeah, okay. But it makes
Kinda
sense
like
to me now.
utility easement.
Different conversation, but that makes sense to me now.
It's actually better for us. So
Sure.
again, if we sell it to them outright and they walk away, and then it ends up being a vacant piece of property, we don't have the ability to buy it back or whatever. So by maintaining ownership, we control what the future of that east side of the road as well.
Okay. So any questions, any additional questions from the commissioners?
Who is the CDC? Who's on that board?
We're still working on the membership. I don't know if you got some appointments made or soon.
There are some memberships that have not been appointed yet, but it's been, it's kind of, they were appointed a few years ago, but then hasn't been reappointed for a while, so that'll be repopulated here.
Okay.
So, 2 term.
It just
Okay.
makes me a little worried that that board hasn't met or done anything. I mean, that's concerning to me that it's not together before we give give permission to people. Does that make sense? I don't know.
So until those appointees are made, who has the authority to make decisions for
exactly.
that group?
Nobody.
So nothing can happen
There
until
has to
that
be
committee's,
appointments made to that board.
so
Mayor,
nothing can
is that
happen
a-
until
is
those
that a mayor
appointments are made?
appointment?
Well, and keep in mind that this is not officially passing this land over to the CDC yet. There still has to be a subsequent agreement put together and executed by both parties.
Very good,
So this is really just, again, setting up the structure
Step one.
of these items.
okay.
How
We should
old,
have those appointments ready at any time.
how old is that
No pressure there.
corporation?
It was put together, I want to say about
2012.
Yeah, I'll say it was about 5 years ago or so. And it was put together because we had applied for some grant money from the state to demolish some abandoned vacant homes. And so that the process to get the grant for money from the state, it has to go through Development Corporation.
Sign, you give it to me.
So it was set up specifically for that process, and then it has been essentially idled since that process was complete a few years ago.
We still got some more steps to approve before anything's filed.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
So this is also an agreement to agree to move forward with the program,
Right.
correct? Okay. Any other questions, statements? I would entertain a motion.
Can we make a requirement that the CDC comes back before the next month with the appointed board? Or do we have that authority to do that?
I think we can do whatever
Or
we
can
would
we
like. don't have to
request
pass a
and
resolution.
say,
I don't
we
think,
can put
Put
that
the
in the
pressure on.
resolution, can't we?
Step 2 doesn't happen until those folks are appointed.
Right.
So it's,
okay,
the mayor doesn't have the ability to accept anything on their behalf. There has to be appointments to that.
okay,
board before any
all right,
activity.
fair enough, fair enough. Trying to keep the ball rolling.
no, I understand, so.
And I think the
Trust
structure's
me,
in
I
place.
remind them about twice a week that we
I
need some
agree.
appointments, so we.
I thought we were carte blanche, and we're not. We're simply starting a process that relies upon appointments, and when the appointments happen in their due time,
Then it'll be
we'll get feedback. Ben will come back to the
Yeah.
RDC and share, and I'm sure there'll be several more resolutions we'll have to deal with
There's
before
at
we
least gonna be some
write a
improvements
check to
for-
anybody.
Okay, fair enough.
So on that note, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve Resolution 2019-04.
I second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion, all opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay. Thank you, Ben, appreciate it. On to the next agenda item, which are the claims, or is the claims. Do we have any questions or comments about the claims, commissioners?
I did notice in our presentation, and I don't know that this really changes anything on the claims, but We have forecasted on the claims $80,000 payments for the LCSC program that we just up to 100,000, and that's on the claims. I don't know if that's just a matter of changing something in our financial circulars or how we do that.
Well, I don't work there anymore, so I've got to figure out how you do that. But I think the best of my recollection, Caleb, that was a motion. I believe Dick made it that we moved to 100,000. I think it's probably just a clerical
Okay.
issue that's not been,
Just
the motion
following through on the
intent has
paperwork.
not caught up with the actual
Okay.
expenditure.
Again, I'm all for it. I just want to make sure.
And
we
I
have
think
all
I'll
our
speak
I's
for the
dotted.
school that they're not going to turn down $20,000 for the position. And if you would maybe have noticed, or if you follow any of the social media, the internships and the interviews, that's full-fledged, straight ahead. First day of school, they hit the ground running. So it's again, I compliment my fellow commissioners on moving forward with that, because it is a very beneficial program, and one that's being looked at the State House, to be quite honest with you.
Awesome.
That's
I motion we approve the claims.
Nice.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Say again? Yes.
Dick.
Yep, that was Dick.
I'm sorry.
Acquiesce, 'cause we want to move
Okay.
forward.
Is there any old business or other topics for conversation that the commission would like to discuss?
I would like to see if, and this might be a question for Joe, if the presentation Emma gave, if that could be on, I know we have this in our YouTube page as it is now, but if it could be on our RDC landing page. This is a great educational piece. It might make it just another avenue for the public to flip through. I know it's kind of lengthy, but the first 5 or 6 pages, I think, are the most informational and beneficial to the public.
And I would ask that the last page, the school page, be included as well, because
Yeah, absolutely.
I tell you, most people look at that and think that the schools are getting robbed, and I will reiterate one more time, that is definitely not the case here. That your community school corporation is benefiting greatly from the advantages that we draw from our TIF area and the RDC.
With the
So-
permission, we can take just Emma's presentation and put that as a separate link. So if you
I think
want
it's a great
an
idea.
outlined, recap, we can do that separate from the meeting.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that'd be phenomenal. We're trying to be as clear as possible, and I think we need to create that quick avenue for people to access it.
That's a fantastic idea. Very good, very good.
I
So-
motion we adjourn.
Well, before we adjourn, I do
Oh,
want to
geez.
say one thing, which is that I want to wish the students a very good year, since it was the first day today, no incidents, so that's always good. And wish all those students out there, my little ones included, a great school year, to make sure that we can hopefully keep supporting them and keep doing what we need to do in order to keep this community the way it is. So that's all I wanted to say. I'll exit the soapbox now. Anyways, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
And I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 And this meeting is over. Thank you, everyone.